The Supreme Court Thursday issued an unexpected decision in a crucial voting rights case that could have larger implications for future U.S. elections. In a 5-4 decision, the High Court ruled Alabama's redrawn congressional map likely violates a key part of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. The justices affirmed a lower court opinion saying the map discriminated against the state's black voting population. Alabama state lawmakers will now have to redraw the map to include a second district to give black voters equal opportunity. For more on this, let's bring in CBS News election law contributor David Becker. He's also the executive director and founder of the Center for Election Innovation and Research. David, let's just start going back a little bit. What was Alabama trying to do? Because every state in one way or another tries to do a similar thing.
Yeah, every state, whoever the majority is, Democrat or Republican, they try to draw lines to maximize their political power. It might be in the state legislature, it might be in Congress. And so they're trying to draw districts where they can maximize the number of districts that their particular political party holds. And that, of course, was done here in Alabama, where there are 7 congressional districts and 6 were drawn to elect Republicans who would presumably be white, and only 1 was drawn to elect an African-American, a black candidate of choice in a state in which, it should be noted, 27% of the voters in Alabama are black.
So why was this decision a surprise, or is it being characterized as a surprise?
Yeah, over the last decade or so, the Roberts Court, which attacked right and is even attacking even further right, had weakened a lot of the protections, even eliminated some of the protections of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. And so for many who were watching this case, it was expected they would further go down this path. And in fact, they had stayed the decision of the lower court, which had found a violation of the Voting Rights Act, which further led everyone who was watching this to think that the court had a majority ready to uphold what the Alabama legislature had done and further weaken the Voting Rights Act. But what actually happened was remarkable for how unremarkable it was. The majority of the court, 5 justices, including the Chief Justice and Justice Kavanaugh, ruled in favor of the plaintiffs, the black voters in this case, and aligned with the lower court that there needs to be another district in which black voters can elect candidates that they choose due to the extreme racially polarized voting. In other words, the effect where African-American voters are voting for candidates in one way, and white voters would be voting in ways to oppose those candidates. That occurs in Alabama. There's no serious contradiction of that. And so, surprisingly, the Supreme Court, by a 5-4 ruling, ruled in favor of those black voters in Alabama.
So what emerges from this in terms of, is there a test, a criteria that was essentially upheld in terms of basically the strength of the Voting Rights Act to rule over voting rights in mostly southern states? Was there something that was affirmed, and what does that mean for voting rights going forward?
Yeah, that's what I meant by it being unremarkable. There has been decades of precedent that established the rules for litigating these cases, and that those cases have been applied in lower federal courts and all the way up to the Supreme Court many, many times. And what the court did in this case is just applied those decades worth of precedents to the facts that were found in this case. And I think what ultimately that means for potential litigants in these cases, for minority voters, for legislatures that are drawing lines, is that the erosion of the protections of the Voting Rights Act have been slowed or perhaps stopped. And the rules that have been applied over decades have been reaffirmed. This is a good thing. Everyone who draws lines in redistricting, and that's a difficult business in some cases, it's good to know what the rules are and know how they're going to be applied by the highest court. And today, Justice Roberts, in his opinion, did that.
CBS News election law contributor David Becker. Thank you, David.
Thanks, John.